Having a lathe in my shop is really quite a luxury. It's one of those tools that, unless you're a turner, it really doesn't get that much attention. But it's also one of those tools that does things that can't be accomplished with any other tool in the shop. About a month ago, I got an email from a Chinese company called Buy Tool, looking to introduce their new lathe into the US market. I was just about to hit the delete button. After all, I have a nice Jet 1221 lathe that cost me north of $1,000. And frankly, other than making a few Christmas gifts and shop jigs, it doesn't really get that much use. Then I noticed the price for their lathe was half the cost of the Jet, and they claimed it had the same capacity as my Jet. I thought, wow, this could be a great way to get a lathe into the hands of people that want to expand their woodworking skill set. After all, I really enjoyed wood turning, and I learned something new with every project. But I also realized that cost can be a big barrier. So I thought maybe this could be the solution. Buy Tool agreed to send me a lathe in exchange for this video. Now, I'm not a spokesman for their company, and I made it very clear that I was going to compare it to my experiences with the more expensive Jet lathe, good or bad. They sent me the tool, and here we are. When I first started unboxing the lathe, I realized that it was about a third smaller than my Jet. The bed of the lathe is smaller in width, and the gearbox only has 2 speed ranges, whereas the Jet has 3. But pulling out a tape measure proved that the smaller lathe had exactly the same capacity. It could handle up to a 12-inch diameter and 21-inch long stock, exactly the same as the Jet. I started taking a closer look at the new lathe, and the similarities continued. It has what looks like a near clone of the speed controller. It allows you to easily change the speed of the lathe with just a turn of a knob. And it gives you a switch to change the direction of spin, forward or back. Even the color was nearly identical to the Jet. Putting it together only required that I add the rubber feet on the bottom, attach the tool caddy, and put the arm on the tailstock crank. Like most tools from overseas, it was covered with a light oil to protect the metal during the trip. I spent a few minutes with a rag and some mineral spirits to clean it all up, and it gave me a chance to look closer at the build quality. The bed is nicely machined, smooth to the touch. Actually, the surface of the bed is better than the Jet. The underside of the lathe is painted with what looks like a rust inhibitor paint, sort of a primer red color. I got a kick out of the big sticker on the front of the lathe, Machorool, which brought a smile to my face. This was the first clear message that the Chinese marketing folks have a real disconnect with us in the United States. What's really confusing is when I looked at the lathe on the Buy Tool website, which calls it Machorool. There is no R on the sticker. Did the sticker maker forget the R? Or did the quality assurance guy just wave it through and say, close enough? Well, I'll refer to it as the Machorool lathe, or Macho for short. It keeps me from laughing. I then opened the gearbox of the lathe. This was the first place it looks like where they really tried to cut costs. The Jet has a 3-pulley speed range, and it's constructed out of machined aluminum. The Machorool has a 2-pulley system that's steel. Both use grooved belts between the pulleys, but the Jet is just much beefier. Driving the pulleys is a DC motor on both machines, and they look similar, but the Jet is larger in size and power, coming in at 1 horsepower. The Macho lathe is smaller and produces just 3/4 of a horsepower. On the Macho lathe, changing the belt from the larger to the smaller pulley is facilitated by loosening the arm attached to the motor arbor, and then moving the lower pulley closer to the top, which creates slack in the belt so you can easily switch from low to high. The low range pulley is set on the left, Working in conjunction with the variable speed controller, it'll give you speeds from 300 to 1200 RPM. After switching the high range pulley, the machine will spin from 750 RPM all the way up to 3500 RPM completely maxed out. In turn, having 3 sets of pulley on the jet gives you much more range. The low range goes from 60 RPM to 900. Medium bumps it from 110 to 1800. And the high range on the jet is about the same as the Macho, topping out at 3600 RPM. The jet uses the same theory to change the pulley positions. Move the motor closer to the top to create slack, and then move the belt. But retensioning the belt is much more refined on the jet, which uses a ratcheting system to keep things tight. The next difference I noticed between the two lathes is the build quality of the tool rest and tailstock. But the Macho feels a bit cheaper and rougher in operation. The tool rest feels thinner and less rigid. The Macho lathe includes this 3-inch faceplate needed to turn bowls. The jet adds a few extra holes, but otherwise it's exactly the same. Also included with the Macho is a spur drive center and a free turning live center for the tailstock. And both use an MT2 taper, which is a common size for many lathes. So that allows you to easily buy accessories like a drill chuck. Both machines have a spindle thread of 1 inch with 8 threads per inch, which allows you to install a self-centering chuck. Depending on how you end up using the lathe, I find that a chuck greatly adds to the utility. Before I started turning wood, I checked some of the build tolerances. I put a dial indicator on the headstock spindle of the Macho, and it spun at 2.5 thousandths deviation. Not ideal, but acceptable for a wood lathe. Next, I checked the bed of the lathe for flatness. I found it warped in the middle, about 10 thousandths from flat. Still, I don't expect this to be of any issue. I found some cherry in my scrap bin, and it seemed like a good place to start. I marked the center of the stock and drove in the spur drive. I centered up the tool rest and began roughing with my gouge. I like to wear a full face shield when roughing, especially on a tool that I'm not that familiar with, just in case the stock wants to jump ship. The Macho ran smooth, and in just a few minutes the stock was round. I'll be the first to say my turning skills need some work. That's the great thing about wood turning. There are so many new skills to learn and refine. My attempt to quickly turn out a small vase didn't come out as well as I hoped. The Macho lathe wasn't the issue. It was me. The vase ended up looking more like a German World War II hand grenade than a vase. Oh well, this was a test drive of the lathe, not a test of my art skills. I took the time to remove my so-called vase from the centers and try it on a chuck. This is a Nova chuck, and it makes an operation like drilling a center hole possible. Overall, I had no issues with this little lathe. I was worried that it might bounce around and need to be secured to the bench. But the rubber feet that come with the lathe work just fine. No vibration or dancing on the bench. Even though it's smaller than my jet, it's still pretty heavy at 78 pounds for one person to bring it up to the bench top. You're probably going to need a hand. But I don't think you need to build a dedicated bench stand for it, unless you end up using it a lot more than I do. The build quality doesn't feel as solid and sound as the jet. In many ways, it's sort of a smaller, cheaper knockoff of the jet. As I was doing this review, I got an advertisement from Rockler about their new house-branded lathe. I'm going to have to take a look at this thing in person, but it sure looks like a near one-to-one match of the Macho lathe with different paint. Even the gearbox and the belt tensioning system look identical. The Rockler lathe is said to be a 12 by 24 inch capacity, 3 inches larger than the Macho and the Jet. I'm beginning to think there's a single manufacturing site that makes all these lathes with different branding. The Rockler lathe is priced at $520 US, but you're going to have to pay another $65 for shipping. The Machorool lathe is listed at $499, including shipping and tax. And just for watching this video, you're going to save another $50. Just use the coupon code DIYMark10 during checkout and you'll save an additional 10%. And that brings us to more than $135 US cheaper than the Rockler and half the cost of the Jet. In summary, the Machorool lathe is sort of a knockoff lathe with a very sweet price. The machine tolerances weren't that great, and it feels more like a toy compared with the Jet. But it also performed well, and it could be a great way to experience wood turning without breaking the bank. And don't forget, you'll need to budget for some turning tools too. And a chuck will also add a lot of utility. I'll put a link to all the lathes that I mentioned in this video in the description below. Now, I make no money or gain no benefit if you decide to use them. They're just for your convenience. I hope you found this video helpful, and I would really appreciate if you could give me the thumbs up, so this video will be presented to others as well. And if you like this kind of content, consider subscribing to the channel, and you can join me for my next adventure. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.